4 o'clock, Sunday Stories, my take on the week and on the world. I guess, first of all, if any of you are on the channel, if you can click into StreamYard and allow your comments to come up onto the screen, I'd appreciate that. And if you do comment, I can't get back to you, then I'll do it after the event. But let's get on with Sunday Stories. And it can all be encapsulated. The week can be encapsulated in the last 2 days. Saturday at Tudor World, Stratford. 2 tremendous tours around Shreve House, the Ghost Guide. People coming from all over England to spend a weekend in Stratford-upon-Avon decide to have an hour's entertainment, an hour's education with Wilfred the Warden, the Ghost Guide, around Shreve House. 2 birthday girls, one quite reluctant to go round, and the other one perhaps a bit younger, showing a keen interest, I would say. And so around we went, and the normal antics of a ghost guide. We have a door that goes into the first room, and if you're very careful, as you close it, it squeaks a lot. And as the people are inside the room and you bang the door shut, it sort of sets the tone. And then we talk about the history of the house, the history of the people who have visited and died there. And we got to a particular room where a young girl, Lucy, 8 to 11 years old, is famous for having been in and around that room as a thief and a pickpocket. And as we came to the end of the story, the young girl started to, I could see in her face that things were happening. And I took some care to call her to the front and talk to her, not in a sort of counselling way. I just asked her a few questions about some of the characters that we have in the room. And then the next room carries some of the most harrowing tales of Shreve House. And it was there that things really started to happen. And when we went downstairs into what we call downstairs, her face suddenly, her eyes opened wide, and she couldn't contain herself any longer. She said, I can see something. There's something there. Now, nobody else could see it. She was pointing to the stairs that we had just come down. And when we finished the tour and she came up afterwards and she started to talk about some of the emotions, some of the almost physical emotions or physical events that had happened to her in the house. She talked about walking up the stairs where a man had been hanged and feeling her throat tighten even before she knew the story. And then as we went through the different levels towards where she really started to feel stuff, those senses heightened all the way through. It's not the first time that this has happened. It's made me more convinced that there are people who have the ability to go a little beyond what would be accepted as normal. I may have that ability myself in certain circumstances. Things have happened which could be unexplainable, are possibly scientifically impossible, and yet still fresh in the memory. Anyway, the tour finished and I was thanked and we spoke to each other, and I told her not to worry, it happens, and that she perhaps did have a heightened sense of that other world, let's say. An uneventful journey home. And when I arrived home, I remembered that I had left a water bag, a 5 litre water container back at Tudor World, and that I would need to go back today, Sunday, to pick it up. I guess the first question I want to ask everyone is, can you be said to have the start of dementia? Hi, Alan. Thanks very much, mate. Can you have the start of dementia if you remember that you've forgotten things? I have in my life taken a lot of bangs around the head. Certainly my father had episodes of dementia, but he forgot things completely. Now, I just wonder what the stages are. As I say, I have forgotten and not forgotten, left things, taken water carriers, water beakers into cafes and then walked out without them. Forgotten they were there completely. Today with the water carrier, I placed it on top of a wall waiting for the bus, and when the bus came, I just walked straight onto the bus. Fortunately, as the bus went past the wall, I saw the water carrier there and managed to get the driver to stop. But I had already remembered that I'd forgotten the water carrier. And so I went over to Stratford to pick this water carrier up. And when I got back into town, Stratford town, to wait for the bus back to Leamington, the timetable said 13:01 and then 15:01 for the next buses back. And I got there at 1300, almost on the dot. And some people told me that the bus hadn't gone by. And so we waited and waited and waited till around 13:30, by which time we figured that they had cancelled the bus and obviously had not told anyone. So I was talking to a lady who apparently was born in Tibet, but spoke perfect English. Or rather, her parents were in Tibet. She was born in England, which might say why she spoke perfect English, and her son. And they were needing to get back to Warwick train station to catch a train back to London. And so we shared a taxi. By which time, in Warwick, I was sitting in the bus stop, waiting for the bus back to Leamington, and a Stratford bus pulls in and then just pulls straight out to Leamington, to Coventry. And I wondered where it came from. It could not have been anything on the timetable from Stratford, because it wasn't even 13:00 or 15:00. It was 2:30. And you see, it just heightens that sense of things falling apart. Physical things, transport, food, logistics, the government, the opposition to the opposition, and the opposition to them. We are entering a stage of the world where craziness is going to be replaced by something much darker, I believe. And it's already happening in America, where conservatives, or not even conservative, people with opposition to the present Democrat government are being raided. I don't mean the president, I mean just ordinary American citizens are being raided by the FBI with guns drawn. Now, bear in mind that the American government at the moment wants to take guns away from every citizen. Except, of course, the politicians. They want to be guarded by people with guns while they take away the guns from the ordinary American citizen and then send the FBI round with guns drawn to arrest them. We look at Russia, and as with anyone at the start, I was right behind Ukraine and the fighting there. But then if you go off the mainstream and you start to listen to people with real knowledge of the politics of the area, they start to talk about the agreement between NATO and Russia, that if Russia gave up their nuclear weapons, NATO would not encroach on Russian territory, the Russian border. And then immediately that was signed, NATO started to encroach more and more towards the Russian border. And yeah, there are two sides to the story, I know that. But it's becoming more and more clear that Ukraine and NATO are not innocent in all of this. I believe that the Americans, probably with NATO help, blew up the pipeline, the gas pipeline, the oil pipe. No, it was the gas pipeline. That now means that very, very little energy is getting into Europe. And what is getting into Europe is being supplied by Russia. How can that be, you say? Well, see, Russia is now selling its energy to China and North Korea, who are selling it to the Europeans at an highly inflated price. And the money is going back to Russia. How can that be? Except if the powers that be in Europe, in the world, the global powers, wish the war to happen. They have stated publicly that there are too many people in the world. Could this be all part of a plan to depopulate many of the countries? You have to ask yourself, if the Russians used tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine on Kiev, would the Germans be willing to lose Berlin? Would we be willing to lose London? Would America be willing to lose New York by striking back with nuclear weapons? Probably not. And so all of this fighting, all of this infighting might actually end in a catastrophic Ukrainian result. Now, what do I know? I only follow politics more fully now than I ever did, because I've realised that it's not my life probably that will be affected. It'll be my kids' lives and the grandkids. That's who's going to be affected. I keep going back to Cuba 2020, where the children and the grandchildren of the people who voted for Castro were in the streets asking for freedom from the same people that their parents and grandparents voted for. You say it seems to be a truism that communism does eventually eat its own, unless you are part of the very, very, very critical few, the Politburo, the Chinese National Committee, the North Korean Committee, or whatever they're called. Unless you're part of that clique, then you will be eliminated. It's a sour, dour ending. And I'm tempted to ask that if I am still here next week, I will be back. I will tell you about more happenings in the week and perhaps better stories from Stratford, or not better stories, more interesting stories like that one today, because that girl was very interesting. Her reaction was very interesting, and it does make the mind think about the possibilities of people seeing things in a house that has had so many desperate and traumatic events happen within it. Interesting. Why don't you come over and visit me? Let's see what you think. Have a great day. Take care, and hopefully see you next week. Alan, thanks very much, Base, and Joanna. Let's get in touch. Let's keep in touch, and let's see where this world takes us. Thanks very much. Take care.